Thank you for joining this episode of Real Talk, Real Trust. I'm your host, Ryan Picchini. I'm the head of go-to-market strategy at dotCMS. I also lead our channel efforts. The promise of this webinar series is to talk about topics, strategies, ideas to help you build long-lasting relationships with your customers and your prospective customers. The foundation of doing that is trust, which is a currency in today's digital world, and how brands are trying to maintain connection with their customers. The topic for today is the importance of nailing your content governance. I'm thrilled to have Chris Baker here from Amdocs alongside Zain, our CEO. I'm going to let them both introduce themselves before we get into it. Chris, why don't we start with you?
Thanks, Ryan. Definitely a topic of passion for me. I've spent the better part of the last 13 or 14 years in the content management, governance, and web strategy space. I am a client partner for Amdocs, a global consulting and systems integration firm. In particular, sit in the studios business, which does a lot of work with dotCMS and other more sort of experiential projects. My background and how I came to join Amdocs was through the acquisition of a digital agency that I co-founded. And so we did a lot of work advising based out of Boston, Massachusetts. So a lot of healthcare, a lot of financial services, advising marketing leaders and marketing teams on, where web fits, where web governance and sort of the broader tech stack that could support their marketing team, should play. So that's my background. Love this space, and really excited to be chatting with you guys today.
Chris, awesome to have you. One of the smartest guys I've met in the web content management, digital experience space. So we're really going to value your perspective today. Zain, how about a quick overview for our listeners? I feel like at this point we're almost co-hosts, so they know who you are, and we're obviously glad to have you and your perspective today too. So Zain, over to you.
Hey everyone, this is Zain again. I'm CEO at dotCMS. I actually parachuted into this industry, spent 10 years in investment banking in my previous life, and then decided to, try my hands at entrepreneurship. And, content management is very dynamic space. So very happy with, what everything we're doing at dotCMS, and obviously happy to talk about how everything is changing around us as we try to kind of stay up to speed.
Changing nonstop, and that's what makes things fun and interesting. For those of you who have who've been on the podcast before, we do like to start with something that's called rapid fire, which is intentionally designed to put our guests on the hot seat, test their ability to be brief in their response, and to have a little fun along the way. So we're going to start with rapid fire. I'm going to ask each of you to try to keep your response to under one sentence. See if you can do it. We'll start with you, Chris. Your favorite AI tool at the moment?
Don't have one. It's how AI is embedded into products for me, because I'm an enterprise guy, and we're seeing really cool applications in the products we use every day. That's what I'm most excited about. Smart applications of AI baked into products. That was more than a sentence, and I'm sorry.
Chris, great answer. You failed terribly on brevity for your first try, but we'll come back to you for another one. Zain,
I'll do better.
Zain, how about to you? Zain, how about to your favorite AI tool at the moment?
Oh, it's super boring. ChatGPT.
Okay. All right. I'm going to leave mine as a mystery for our readers. They can reach out to me directly, but I will say it sits at the intersection of discoverability of brands and LLMs. And there's quite a few cool tools out there at the moment.
Right.
Chris, best example of where AI is having an impact for the greater good.
Yeah. To me, it's all about these massive data sets that you can now interact with and surface insights from without losing analysts, years off of analysts' lives. I think that's where we're seeing it in so many applications. Water,
Yep.
Clean energy, you name it. That's
Awesome.
the most powerful applications for me. Yep.
Awesome. Zain, how about for you?
For me, I guess after tech, the most interesting industry is healthcare. I think it's going to dramatically change over the next decade or so. And yeah, I think AI is having huge impact, whether it's diagnostics to biotech, longevity, whatever, what have you. I think it's changing very quickly.
Zain, you followed Chris in his first answer. Tons of insight, agree in healthcare, failed miserably on brevity. So I'm going to try and make the last two questions a bit easier for you. Favorite travel destination as within the last 2 years, a place that you've been or a place you'd highly recommend, just as a way for our listeners to get to know you a little bit better. Chris, how about you?
Beautiful Sunapee, New Hampshire, where I am right now. Easy.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. How about you, Zain?
It's a surf town called Sayulita in Mexico.
Oh,
I
yeah. Ben,
spent
beautiful.
a couple of months there a couple of years ago. I had a really good time.
Very cool. All right, listeners, there's two options for you. Last question for you, Chris. How many hours do you sleep on average a night having three children under 3?
Well, the twins are now 9 months, so more than I used to. It's a good night if we get 7. I'll take 7 every day of the week. So
Sure.
if I can get more than that, it's rare.
Got it. Got it. Hang in there, Chris. You're in the
Thanks.
thick of it. Thanks for the fun to get started. Let's get into
Good.
the issue at hand, which is content governance, and it's a very interesting topic, especially with the different types of AI models that are impacting how digital experiences are created and delivered. Chris, one of the things that we talked about when we first got together on the podcast was this idea of a CMS being a website tool to create and deploy content. That's evolved into being able to deploy content across a bunch of digital screens. But you said something interesting. It's now a brand governance system, and that's more important than ever. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for too long in our space, the website sort of sat apart of so many other brand touch points. I've been doing this for long enough to, have been around for the very pre-digital days the ride the wave of digital marketing. To me, that what always felt like a gap is closing, where we're starting to see a recognition that we can't talk to customers differently through our web content than we do through other channels and touch points. And there's so much sprawl. There was DAM, there's CMS, there's this, there's that, and in many cases they weren't tightly in sync. And so I think, and especially with AI and tools, where we can actually make sure that our voice is expressed consistently baked into products like dotCMS, we're going to see the role of CMS really expand to ensure that content that's delivered regardless of channel is governed, and from a regulatory perspective, certainly, but also from a brand, tone and voice perspective. I think that's really
Yeah.
the opportunity here, is to be much more consistent with how we go to market and to enforce some standards that maybe get missed sometimes in current architectures.
Yeah, it's interesting the idea of standards being enforced throughout, because historically you could only introduce those standards, towards the front of the content creation and deployment process, right? And if something slipped through, it was harder to kind of manage that once it went through the approvals, if there were changes that were made. So, Zane, how about you? Any thoughts specifically around how CMS is evolving into a brand governance system, and why it's becoming more and more critical to the enterprise?
Yeah, I mean, I think the CMS is at the center of, the conversation. It's the only tool that is purpose built to have that kind of control and governance. It centralizes your content. Again, that's used to be what the CMS was, like a content repository. And now with, the number of channels exploding, and the scale of content is like increasing so exponentially, the CMS becomes all the more important to have that control and permissions. And yeah, I mean, again, it's very common for a lot of large enterprises to have these fragmented, siloed teams and departments creating content. And what Chris said initially, I think it's super important now to have that consistent story being told, regardless of whether it's existing customers, new customers, internally to the employees. That consistency is really important, again, because of the explosion of content. And yeah, I do believe CMS is at the heart of it, with all the governance tools kind of built in.
Yeah, Zane, it's a unique opportunity, and it's also a scary thing. The explosion of content, and then figuring out how you can utilize that content effectively with maintaining consistency. There's going to be a shift in terms of brands who can figure that out, because with everyone having tools at their fingertips to create more content, there's not resource constraints to some degree. You're going to have to put out more content. It's just a matter of how you govern it and how you make sure that content is valuable. Chris, this idea of content at rest versus, generative or dynamic experiences, can you talk about the boundary between those two things and how organizations should be thinking about them when they're scaling their content operations?
Yeah, for sure. And since we tend to work with teams that require a lot of control, whether you're in healthcare or what have you. And we're certainly not seeing broad-based adoption in the generative web that, we know is coming in certain applications as much just yet, because the risk is how do you govern, right? How do you make sure that what an LLM is choosing to respond meets your criteria, your brand voice, sure, but much beyond that, doesn't introduce any risk, compliance or otherwise. What I think is really interesting is the CMS being the probably best and richest source of content at rest, or vetted, approved, on-brand content that tells the story the way your organization wants to speak to its market and its various personas, makes it a really rich um, source for agents to learn how to speak in the voice of the brand, and to empower, as you go in this more agentic direction. The CMS, I think, is going to play a really critical role in terms of how brands train their agents to express themselves in the way they want to be seen and want to show up for every interaction. So I really see that being the breakdown, and I think the CMS needs to continue to be the primary source for that content at rest, because that's not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing, and it's a critical part of this more generative content being successful.
Chris, I think it's a hugely important point. I just want to clarify something for our listeners. You're defining content at rest as something that has been built, approved, stored, that it's not necessarily dynamic in nature, but it is what the baseline that can be leveraged to create this dynamic content. Is that right? It's essentially the foundational assets that have already gone through workflows that are being utilized to scale the remainder of content needs to be created.
Yeah. The content at rest is everything where there was likely many humans in the loop, right? That approved it along the way. That more human intensive content that is always and still will serve a critical role going forward.
I'm curious, before we get into the future of how you think about content governance, what the impact of having the wrong content governance model means. So just to kind of level set for our listeners on, what you've seen this means for organizations if they don't get it right. So, Chris, you want to touch on that first?
Sure. Yeah. I think it's a topic that has a couple angles to it. When I think about content governance in the conversations I've had, particularly in the most regulated spaces, it's always the balance between marketing agility and the nature of the governance process, and how that by its nature slows down that agility. I like to use the term healthy tension that always exists there. The other part, I think, is sort of engineering related, but it's a real reason for why dotCMS and modern CMS platforms are so powerful. Is for a long time it was pretty dev heavy to get a really tuned and smart content publishing workflow built out and stood up. That's become much easier, but it's still not something that I see everyone having or everyone using their CMS for, surprisingly enough. So I think there's those two areas that you're always having to look at, right? Like, what is the engineering backlog, and do you have the wherewithal to build a governance system that's flexible enough into your content tools, and i.e. CMS? And then do you have the right amount of governance to make sure you're not taking risks with your brand or with your legal team or what have you, while also giving marketing the maximum agility possible? And that, but where those lines get drawn, there's constantly conversation, and
Yep.
there's a lot of nuance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for that context, Chris. It's an equation that is ever evolving, and having the right tools for each of the different folks who are involved in the governance process, right? The from a compliance officer who needs to review the content to an IT leader who needs to make sure that they're deploying through an experience that is secure and performant, to the marketing folks who want to make sure it's on brand. So there's multiple layers within this concept of content governance. I think maybe we'll kind of look to the future a little bit. Zain, I'll start with you. You talk to a lot of our clients, IT and business leaders. What are some of the topics that come to mind for them, that are recent, specifically around governing content, that you'd want to highlight?
I mean, the most important piece, I think, is, the responsibility for the CMS to provide context first and foremost. Your AI is only as good as, the data. And yes, I think the first, I guess, stab everybody's having with generative AI is, just playing with it a little bit, but it's still super early for especially regulated industries to be using that content, at least in public facing platforms or channels. So for content management, we look at it as twofold the responsibility. The first is, as I said, providing context. And that can come through, templates. That can come through structured content that we do really well, and then also, brand governance, tone of voice, data that you can really live in the CMS. And then the second thing after that is supervision / governance. And there is obviously the workflows, the permissions on what you can use AI for and what you cannot, and then obviously taking your generative AI workflows through additional, I guess, approval levels. But then beyond that, I think the next stage, I guess, we're not there yet, but you will have kind of agents supervising agents. So, you will have one part which will be generating the content, hopefully with context already, and with guidelines and everything I described earlier. And then the second stage is for AI to also review constantly and flag, whatever falls outside of whatever brand or compliance guidelines that, exist within your industry or for your company.
It's an exciting world and a very scary world to think that we build the foundation and base, and then we orchestrate an agent to create the content, approve the content before it goes live, and then have an agent monitor that content to make sure that we and the previous agent didn't make any mistakes. So it's going to be a new world in terms of how that comes to fruition. But we're going to get into Genic a little bit more here in a moment. But Chris, anything you'd add to Zain's commentary around some of the emerging topics for marketing and IT leaders when it comes to governing content?
I think he hit it. No, I mean, it's the layers of where do we plug into, not even just generative AI, but just the broader world of AI and all the directions it's going, and MCP. Like, where are all the ways that we're going to be, that, and when I say we, I mean, in this case, content management leaders and systems, how are they going to be bringing value? How are they going to be staying at the core like they have for so long? And I think it's everything Zain said. I think there's it's scary. It does seem to me far from now where we're going to have a sandwiched agent stack that's going to be deploying all the way to the client. I'm just not seeing that yet in the big, in the types of businesses I work with, but it'll come, I think. And when I say it'll come with a really smart, savvy, creative human
Uh,
guiding
Directing.
that and correcting it, because we all know that the bar for brand is only going up in this world. Very quickly, there's going to be diminishing returns on the lowest level of content production. The stuff that, I'll admit 13 years ago, clients hired us for, and we did a lot of, right? You're not doing anymore.
The
So
the
exactly.
BuzzFeed top 5 lists
Yes.
of the agentic world.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that this topic is really interesting. The idea of agentic AI in both delivering brand experiences and monitoring. And so we talked earlier about the CMS providing the content at rest, and that's sort of the core content, but that content getting extended through agents, which is an exciting idea. It's also a very scary idea for a brand marketer to allow an agent to have a conversation with the customer and be the conduit for your brand. But I think that's coming faster than folks realize. So what are the best practices that you've seen so far, Chris, in order to enable that brand experience with an agent, but also ensure that the brand is protected?
Yeah. I think the first thing is historical content optimization. I think what you get if you're going to try to have your CMS be the single source of truth, which you have to be really careful about, not the single source of truth, but a real source of truth for training agents on your brand and how you want to show up, is to make sure that who your brand was 7 years ago isn't expressed, deep in the depths of your website, and that you are consistent in terms of how you're showing up at every point when we're talking about the content at rest, right? So step one is that, and then ensuring, and I think the other thing is being careful about software fragmentation, in terms of, if you are going to go with the route of having a DAM and a CMS and, maybe a social management tool and, all of the various places where you may have content at rest, making sure that you are thoughtful about where you can start to create more single sources of truth for your agents to train on, and for your agents to go for vetted and approved answers or responses to provide to a customer. So a lot of what I know Amdocs is doing in our Amaze platform, which is telco specific, really revolves around that, is pulling from a very specific set of the guardrails that you need to be able to set to certainly let someone change their phone plan via an agent and not have to talk to a human, but making sure that the guardrails around where that starts and stops and how that agent can interact and what they can say and can't is all baked into the experience. So that's really
Yeah.
the most critical stuff to me.
There's a few interesting things I want to play back for our listeners that I think are really critical. The data set that the model is referencing to then deliver the agentic experience has to be really well refined, and it has to be, there has to be a standard in terms of where that data is coming from, right? I think the other pieces that you called out at the end, which I love, is guiding that agentic experience to where it should end, to where there needs to be a human in the loop, because things like a pricing discussion in our world, or maybe in the banking world, it's advising on a specific plan that they should invest in. Those are nuanced discussions that there are limits of the agentic experience. And so defining where those start and stop is going to be really critical. Zain, I do want to kick it over to you. You have a lot of thoughts around agentic. You've done a lot of research here. Can you talk about the idea of using agentic experiences to deliver key brand experiences that compliance-led industries are going to want to focus on?
So again, from beyond what I described earlier, this in context of content management. The first is contextualizing your experiences or your AI to generate those experiences, if that's what you're doing, and then supervise. And then the third, I guess, what agents will do is orchestrate. And orchestration, depends on, all kinds of data. It's user data. Again, we don't have a lot of that in regulated industries, but I believe that is going to change, and it is changing already. Our customers are definitely thinking about, user data more than they have in the past. They were almost allergic to the word, but now it's absolutely important because your AI is only as good as your context and data. So we will see again what some are calling, hyper personalization, for example, very highly context aware, and I don't only mean from brand guidelines and governance perspective, but also user profile perspective, right? I mean, where's the user located? What's their past behavior? What are they interested in? What are the trends locally? What's the weather like? Is there a local holiday? So that's the next stage of agents becoming more context aware. So not only will they bring user data from your CRM, they will also get, your browsing data from your browser, and then they will also scrape the internet, bring all of that information into that experience, and only AI can be that powerful to orchestrate that experience live, right? But then again, Ryan, you made a good point that a human oversight is important, because at what point does marketer sit back and say, my AI is going to now orchestrate this entire experience? That's a tough one. And again, now I think we're going to the point where only an AI agent can also supervise that behavior and provide some kind of insights into how the user responded to this orchestration, and then get better. Again, I'm talking this very bold, grand vision, but that's probably where this is going eventually.
But Zain, I don't think it is, and I don't think we're super far off. We even are building things today like our MCPs, right? And this is the idea of connecting bringing your own model and bringing in various models that are going to give the context on the weather, Zain, in addition to the data from the CRM. And so being able then to define how personalized you want to get based on integrating these different models and using a centralized source of content is going to be critical. So I guess my question, do either of you want to touch quickly on MCP and the importance, a little bit about what that means and the importance of it in terms of delivering the next generation of experiences?
Yeah, I mean, it's great to see platforms like dotCMS pushing forward. I think MCP is super critical to that governance that we've been talking about, by its nature and interconnectedness of these experiences, right? And there's never one source, one tool, and if you think of it as it's sometimes described sort of the API layer for agents. It's the plumbing we all needed to be able to see this next step forward for our experiences. So exciting to see. We're in the early days, and I think we're gonna have so many more tools as builders, a few months from now than we've ever had, really. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, guys. One thing I was curious about is if you're seeing organizations begin to define standards or protocols in which the agents can consume content or data.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, the most advanced, I won't speak to specifics, obviously, but the most advanced adoptions of AI that I've seen are incredible. They're really enterprise knowledge systems where employees have access to the entire sort of corpus of a company's knowledge and data. However, it's not the entirety. It's whatever they themselves need to complete their job, and nothing that they shouldn't have access to, right? So they're not able to access everybody else's salaries, whatever the example might be. But I think I've seen and heard of some just incredible applications where you're putting, I think every every organization, from the smaller organization I was a part of for many years to the global scale businesses I serve now and am a part of now, struggles with enterprise knowledge management and how do you distribute knowledge to the right person at the right time. We're getting so much better at that so fast. And it's super, super exciting to see, but it's complex.
Yeah. Chris, the idea of knowledge management and having some parameters around how agents are engaging with essentially those databases of information, I think is a great use case. Zain, are there others that come to mind in terms of where you're seeing organizations put standards or protocols around how agents can interact with either its content or data sets to ensure that they have the right controls in place?
I guess the only one I would add to what Chris said is maybe like prompt engineering. There is absolutely a long way to go in like prompt governance, if I may,
Interesting.
because that's really how the organization. I mean, that's the starting point. That's literally step number one. So it's about treating prompts and not just outputs as a business critical asset that needs structure, review, alignment, brand standards, and that will obviously provide some kind of reusability and templatizing the way you kind of interact with AI. So that's something that is on the minds, but obviously, as I said, it's wild, wild west out there at this point. People are obviously still learning and adapting and really understanding how this technology really works. I think the next stage would be, again, the input needs to be governed, not just the output.
Yep. Absolutely. That's not a vantage point that we hear often, but I think it's a really, really important one because there's a lot of ways to put parameters around what information is discovered, right? It's a great thought starter for some of our listeners out there. We're getting close to our time, so I just have a few more questions for you guys. Thanks so much for rolling with us today. This idea of content governance, in this time of explosion of AI and the ROI around it, it almost feels like an oxymoron. You're saying governance and you're asking about ROI in the same, I'm asking about them in the same sentence, but how does content governance drive ROI for an enterprise, Chris?
Wow. Well, I mentioned earlier that the bar for content that converts, content that delivers business value is going to be actually, going up exponentially as the old AI slop we've been talking about starts to permeate in so many areas. And so, while it may be difficult to build systems to quantify, I think smart governance structures that ensure that the bar for your brand's content is going up faster than your competitors will ensure that you're delivering that experience that converts and that experience that wins out in this ever increasing competitive landscape for information. The other ROI side of things, and it's unsexy, but sometimes I operate in that business and I find the problems interesting, is looking at ROI from the perspective of what risks are you avoiding, right? What are you where are you not spending dollars on lawyers? Where are you not spending dollars on other things that nobody wants to be wasting time on because you've done the work up front? And so I think
Yep.
those are my two. Yeah.
Great. Chris, thank you very much for that. Zain, how about you? You got the easier sequencing this time, Zain, on the hard question.
I know I only have to repeat what Chris said. Super simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, similar. There's no direct return on governance. It's obviously second degree. The second degree is it lets you scale content while reducing risk. I mean, everybody can scale content, but if it's going to blow up your compliance guidelines, obviously that is going to result in what Chris said in a lot of lawyer fees. So it lets you scale. So that's the efficiency side of things. It boosts your efficiency. It streamlines your workflows. It, lets you produce 1,000 times more content live, based on all this context, while obviously reducing risk. And those are the two things that you can actually measure, right? How much have you scaled? How much have you improved your efficiency? How streamlined your workflows are, how much time is reduced in going through those steps, how quicker you are to market with campaigns and new content, which is obviously far more contextualized. And then on the other side, you can also measure how much fewer cases of content is being published that does not meet your standards or governance guidelines.
Love it, guys. Thank you so much. I'm going to take the liberty and the unfair advantage of going last as the host who's not usually supposed to respond to his own questions, but I'm going to do it. I do want to weigh in on this one as someone who's tightly involved in all things go to market. I do think the ROI of governance is brand. And the reason for that is we are in a time with AI that you now have visibility and control with Agentic to make sure your message stays tight, to monitor it properly, and to be the consistent drum about what your company does, right? And that's something that's very, very hard to do historically. And so CMS has always helped with that. With AI, we're going to amplify that. The other thing is I think it helps unlock work streams that have been in the queue in a priority list and planning. For example, personalization is something that brands have always wanted to do, even within, let's say, financial services. But because of the inability to govern all that content, to put it through the proper workflows at scale and create it, it's always got pushed to the back burner. And so I think the new governance models that exist as a result of AI are going to unlock things like personalization that have been in the queue for a long time for a lot of folks in compliance-led industries. So that was unfair, how I presented it and how I answered, but sometimes that's the benefit of being the podcast host. So we're going to wrap up here, guys. Thanks for the fun today. Takeaways, I'm just going to ask for your final thoughts. What advice do you have for our listeners who want to reignite conversation around content governance and scaling their content operations? How should they approach that conversation? What should be the arrows in their quiver that are going to help them get it started? I'm going to go to you first, Zain, and then Chris, and I promise I won't answer myself.
I guess, again, I think just taking from my last response, obviously find the return in efficiencies and reduce risk. Something I say, start small. There's a lot of things we said today. It can sound quite overwhelming, but it's super important to start small, measure efficiency. I guess keep it simple, right? These things can get very complex, and I think Chris said that earlier. The number of tools, it can absolutely explode. And one thing that we are trying to do is to bring all of that, like centralize that in the CMS, dotCMS. So yeah, that's those are like the 3 main points.
Great. Thank you, Zain. Chris, to you.
Yeah, I think the biggest advice I have is if you find yourself in an AI averse organization where you're in a highly regulated space and it's taking a while and you fear that you're falling behind, I think governance is the place to start to get your organization comfortable and to put in place those foundational blocks that you need to move fast or increase the speed with which you adopt all these amazingly powerful tools that are coming our way. So I think governance is a really powerful and timely topic to be bringing into an organization because it's foundational to success in the new world of AI. So yeah, that's my big one.
Great. Chris, thank you. It's a catalyst to get in conversations around all the innovative things that you could do. And I did say Chris is one of the smartest guys in this arena, and he took us home with one of the best comments we've had on the podcast to date. So Chris from Amdocs, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure. Zain, always amazing having you on the show. Wouldn't be the same without you. Thanks to our listeners for tuning in. We'll see you on the next episode.
This was fun.
Thanks, guys.